The recording studio on Kepler Station was quiet except for the soft hum of air recyclers. Commander Zex Thul sat in a chair made for his four-armed body, his crystalline skin catching the dim lights. Across from him, reporter Veltara adjusted her recording equipment with her long, thin fingers. The war had been over for 3 years, but the scars on Zex Thul's blue skin told the story of someone who had seen too much fighting. "Are you ready to begin?" Veltara asked in the standard galactic language. Her voice was soft, knowing this would not be an easy conversation. Zex Thul moved his lower arms in what humans would recognize as a nervous gesture. His translator box crackled to life as he spoke in his own harmonic language. "I have thought about this for many months. My people believe I should not speak of these things. They say it brings shame to discuss our defeats. But you disagree?" "I disagree because what I saw was not really defeat. It was education. The humans taught us something about war that we did not know before, something that still keeps me awake at night." Veltara leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about your first encounter with human forces." Zex Thul's four eyes closed for a moment. When he opened them, they seemed to look past the reporter into some distant memory. "It was at Ross 128. I was tactical officer aboard the dreadnought Eternal Glory. We were part of a fleet of 47 ships. Our mission was simple: take the mining colony, capture or destroy the human defenders, move on to the next target." He paused, his breathing making a soft whistling sound through the holes in his neck. "Our intelligence said there were 12 human ships defending the colony. 12 against 47. Our fleet commander, Admiral Kethvar, was almost insulted by the assignment. He said it would be over before the midday meal." "What happened when you arrived in the system?" "The humans were waiting for us. Their 12 ships were positioned directly between our fleet and the planet, not hiding behind the planet's gravity well, not using the asteroid field for cover, just sitting there in open space like they were daring us to come closer." Zex Thul's upper arms gestured as he continued. "Admiral Kethvar opened communications. He demanded their surrender. He told them they were outnumbered and outgunned. He offered them safe passage if they would stand down and allow us to take the colony without bloodshed. Did they respond?" "Oh, they responded." The human commander was named Jake Murphy. His image appeared on our main screen. He was young for a human, maybe 30 of their years. He had the kind of face that looked like he smiled often. But he was not smiling when he looked at us. Veltara adjusted her recording device. What did he say? 3 words in their language. Our translator had to work for a moment to find the meaning. "Come and take it." That was all. Then he closed the communication channel. Zex Thul's skin color shifted slightly, becoming darker. Among his people, this was a sign of strong emotion. Admiral Kethvar laughed. He told his staff that humans were clearly a primitive species with no understanding of military reality. He ordered the fleet to advance and destroy the human ships. And then we learned our first lesson about humans. Zex Thul's voice became quieter. The human ships did not retreat. They did not try to run. They came straight at us. The alien veteran was quiet for several seconds before continuing. "I had studied human military history before the war. I knew they had fought wars among themselves for thousands of years, but nothing in their records prepared me for what I saw that day." Describe the battle. "It began normally. Our ships fired from long range. The human ships fired back. Their weapons were less powerful than ours, but they were accurate. Very accurate. Too accurate for ships that small moving that fast." Zex Thul's lower arms moved in what his species used for emphasis. Then something changed. As our fleets got closer, the human ships started doing things that made no tactical sense. One of their destroyers, a ship called the Lightning, suddenly accelerated directly toward our battle line. Our gunners thought the pilot had lost control. They almost stopped firing because they thought it was a damaged ship drifting toward us. But it was not damaged? No. The Lightning's commander, a woman named Carol White, had ordered maximum speed toward our flagship. When she was close enough, she fired every weapon on her ship at once. The explosion damaged 3 of our vessels and completely destroyed her own ship. Veltara made notes on her datapad. "A suicide attack?" That is what we thought at first. Admiral Kethvar called it the desperate act of a defeated enemy. But then another human ship did the same thing. Then another. They were not desperate acts. They were planned tactics. The recording studio seemed to grow colder as Zexthal continued his account. The human commander Murphy was coordinating these attacks from his flagship, a heavy cruiser called the Defiant. Each time one of his ships made a ramming attack, he would broadcast something over the communication channels. What kind of broadcasts? Music, human war songs. I did not understand them at the time, but I have studied human culture since the war ended. They were songs about sacrifice, about fighting for something greater than yourself, about not giving up even when death is certain. Zexthal's skin shifted color again. The strangest thing was that other human ships would join in the singing. Even as they were dying, even as their ships were burning around them, they would sing along with Murphy's broadcasts. How long did the battle last? 18 hours. 18 hours for what should have been a 2-hour engagement. By the end, we had destroyed all 12 human ships, but they had damaged or destroyed 21 of ours. Almost half our fleet was either gone or unable to continue fighting. The aliens' 4 eyes seemed to focus on something far away. But that was not the most disturbing part. When we finally reached the mining colony, we expected to find the civilian population in panic. Humans fleeing in whatever ships they could find. Instead, we found them preparing to fight us on the ground. The civilians were going to resist? Not just resist. They had spent the 18 hours of space battle preparing defenses. Men, women, even their younglings who were old enough to hold weapons. They had turned their mining equipment into weapons. They had built barriers in the streets. They were ready to make us pay for every building, every street, every room. Veltara looked up from her notes. Did you have to fight them? No. Admiral Kethvar had lost too many ships. He decided the colony was not worth losing more vessels. We withdrew from the system. Zexthal's breathing became heavier. But as we left, Murphy's final message was broadcast to our entire fleet. What did he say? He said that we had seen what 12 ships could do. He said there were thousands, more human ships in their fleet. And he said that every human in the galaxy would fight us the same way his people had fought, with everything they had until their last breath. The alien veteran was quiet for a long moment. At the time, we thought it was just brave words from a dying enemy. We thought Murphy was trying to scare us with empty threats. But you were wrong. We were very wrong. That battle at Ross 128 was just the beginning. Over the next 5 years, we would learn that Murphy had not been making threats. He had been making promises. Zexthal looked directly at the reporter. Every human we fought after that day proved that Murphy had spoken the truth. They fought us with a kind of determination that defied all military logic. They would sacrifice themselves for strangers. They would die for ideas. They would keep fighting even when they could not win. And this surprised you? It surprised us because we had never encountered a species that fought that way. Most civilized races understand when they are defeated. They surrender to save lives. They negotiate to minimize losses. Humans do not seem to understand the concept of hopeless odds. The recording equipment hummed softly as Veltara prepared for the next part of the interview. Tell me about the ground campaigns. Zexthal's skin grew darker again. The ground campaigns were where we learned that space battles were actually the easy part of fighting humans. On the ground, where we could see them face to face, we discovered that humans are capable of things that would break the minds of most species. Such as what happened on Proxima Centauri B. Such as what Captain Lisa Rodriguez taught us about the limits of interrogation. Such as what Staff Sergeant Ryan Brooks showed us about human determination. The alien veteran looked at his hands, all 4 of them trembling slightly. Those are stories that still give me nightmares. But they are stories that need to be told, because they explain why this war ended the way it did. They explain why my people now treat humans with a respect that borders on fear. Veltara nodded. We will continue with those accounts in our next session. As the recording equipment powered down, Zexthal remained in his chair, staring at nothing. The memories of Ross 128 were just the beginning of a war that had changed how his entire species viewed the nature of conflict and courage. 3 days later, Veltara returned to the recording studio. Commander Zexthul was already waiting, his forearms folded in a position that showed he had been thinking deeply about their previous conversation. The crystalline patterns on his skin seemed duller than before, as if the memories he was about to share had already begun to drain something from him. "You mentioned ground campaigns," Veltara said as she activated her recording equipment. "Tell me about Proxima Centauri B." Zexthul's breathing made that soft whistling sound again. "Proxima Centauri B was where I learned that humans are even more dangerous on the ground than they are in space. I was assigned as a liaison officer to observe prisoner interrogations. My commanders wanted to understand how human military units operated, what their strategies were, how their command structure worked. This was standard procedure? Yes. With every other species we had fought, prisoners would provide information readily. It was considered civilized behavior. You fight with honor, but when captured, you cooperate to minimize further suffering. This is how warfare is conducted among reasonable beings." Veltara made notes on her datapad. But humans were different. Humans were impossible. Zexthul's upper arms gestured in frustration. "Our first important prisoner was Captain Lisa Rodriguez. Her reconnaissance unit had been overrun during the siege of New Austin Settlement. She was wounded, but not seriously. Young, maybe 28 human years. She looked like she should have been easy to break." "What happened when you tried to interrogate her?" Our interrogation specialist, Commander Vexnall, was very experienced. He had successfully questioned prisoners from 7 different species during various conflicts. He began with standard psychological pressure techniques: isolation, discomfort, threats to her fellow soldiers who had also been captured. Zexthul's skin color shifted to a darker blue. Rodriguez listened to everything he said. She nodded like she understood. She asked questions about our procedures. She seemed cooperative. But she was not? She was gathering intelligence while pretending to be intimidated. For 3 days, she fed us completely false information about human troop movements, supply, lines, and defensive positions. But the way she did it was brilliant. She mixed lies with small truths that we could verify, making us believe the larger lies. The alien veteran's 4 eyes focused on the reporter. At the same time, she was learning about us. She would ask innocent questions about our equipment, our schedules, our security procedures. She made it seem like she was just making conversation, to pass time. "How did you discover she was lying?" "We sent a patrol to verify one of her stories about a human supply depot. The patrol walked into an ambush. 15 of our soldiers died because Rodriguez had sent them exactly where human forces were waiting." Zexthul's voice became quieter. When we confronted her about this, she smiled. She actually smiled and said, "Did you really think I would betray my own people to save myself?" Veltara looked up from her notes. "What did your interrogators do then?" "They increased the pressure, more isolation, less food, uncomfortable temperatures. But Rodriguez seemed to get stronger instead of weaker. She started asking our guards questions about their families, their homes, their reasons for fighting. She was trying to understand us the same way we were trying to understand her." "And then she escaped?" Zexthul's breathing became heavier. "On the 4th day I arrived at the detention facility to find chaos. Rodriguez had somehow gotten out of her restraints. The security recordings showed what she had done. Which was? She deliberately dislocated her own shoulder to make her arm small enough to slip through the restraint cables. The pain must have been enormous, but she made no sound. She did this in complete silence while the guards were changing shifts. The alien's upper arms moved in what his people used to show amazement. Once free, she used her bootlaces and pieces of her uniform to make weapons. She killed 4 guards and wounded 3 others before stealing a communication device from the security station. She tried to call for help? No. She transmitted detailed information about our base layout, guard schedules, and weapon positions directly to human forces. Real-time intelligence that her people used to plan an attack that happened 6 hours later. Veltara stopped writing. She coordinated an attack while escaping. She coordinated an attack while being recaptured. Our remaining guards found her in the communication room, still transmitting data even though she had been shot twice. When they dragged her back to detention, She was laughing despite her wounds. Zexthel's skin grew even darker. I asked her why she was laughing. She looked at me with those strange human eyes and said something our translator had trouble with. She said her grandmother survived something called the Bataan Death March. She said we amateurs had no idea what humans could endure. Did you understand what she meant? Not at the time. I have studied human history since then. The Bataan Death March was a forced march of prisoners during one of their world wars. Thousands died from starvation, disease, and brutality, but some survived through sheer determination. Rodriguez was telling us that compared to what her own people had done to each other, we were gentle. The recording studio was quiet, except for the hum of air recyclers. Velterra waited for Zexthel to continue. But Rodriguez was not the most disturbing case. That was Staff Sergeant Ryan Brooks. Tell me about Brooks. Brooks was wounded in an ambush near the southern continent. His unit was forced to retreat and could not carry him. Standard military procedure would be to surrender when abandoned by your forces. Brooks did not surrender. Zexthel's 4 hands clenched into fists. For 8 days, Brooks conducted a one-man war against our supply lines. Using nothing but equipment he salvaged from the battlefield and knowledge of human military engineering, he destroyed 3 supply convoys. One man destroyed 3 convoys? He used improvised explosives made from medical supplies and ammunition he found. He set traps using his own equipment as bait. He poisoned a water source that our troops used regularly. 27 of our soldiers died because of one wounded human who refused to give up. Velterra made more notes. How did it end? On the 8th day, our forces finally tracked him to a cave system where he had been hiding. When they entered the cave, they found Brooks dead from his original wounds. He had been dying slowly for over a week but kept fighting anyway. The alien veteran's voice became very quiet. But even in death, he was still fighting. He had rigged his body with explosives made from his remaining equipment. When our soldiers tried to recover his remains, the trap activated. 3 more of our people died. Why would someone do such a thing? I asked the same question. I spoke with human prisoners about Brooks. They told me he had a family, a wife, and 2 young children back on Earth. They said he knew he was going to die from his wounds, but he also knew that every day he kept fighting was one more day his family had to live. Zexthel looked directly at the reporter. This is what we could not understand about humans. They do not fight just for victory. They fight for time. Every minute they delay us is precious to them because it means someone they love has another minute of life. This changed how you viewed the war? It changed how we viewed humans. Brooks was not a special soldier. He was not elite forces or specially trained. He was just a regular human who decided that dying slowly was better than giving up quickly. The alien's breathing became more labored. After Brooks, our commanders realized that taking human prisoners was almost more dangerous than fighting them in open battle. A captured human was not really captured. They were just fighting from a different position. Did this make you treat prisoners differently? We tried different approaches. Comfortable cells, better food, medical treatment for wounds. We thought maybe humans would cooperate if we showed kindness instead of pressure. Velterra looked up. Did it work? It made them more polite while they continued to resist us. A human named Lieutenant Gary Stone thanked us every day for our good treatment. He complimented our food. He asked about our families. He was the most pleasant prisoner we ever held. But he still would not cooperate? After 2 weeks of pleasant conversation, Stone escaped by making a key from materials in his food tray. He had been studying the lock mechanism every time guards opened his cell. He had memorized the guard schedules by listening to their footsteps. He had planned his escape from the moment he was captured, all while being perfectly friendly to everyone. Zexthel's forearms gestured in what humans would recognize as helplessness. Stone made it back to human lines and provided them with detailed intelligence about our prisoner-holding procedures. A week later, human forces rescued 43 of their people from our detention facilities using Stone's information. What did you learn from these experiences? We learned that humans have a different relationship with defeat than other species. For most civilized beings, capture means the fight is over. For humans, capture is just a change in battlefield conditions. The alien veteran was quiet for several moments. But the most important thing we learned was that humans fight differently when they are fighting for others than when they are fighting for themselves. Rodriguez, Brooks, Stone, they were not trying to save their own lives. They were trying to save other people's lives. A week passed before the next interview session. When Veltara entered the recording studio, she found Commander Zexthul standing at the window, looking out at the stars. His forearms hung at his sides, and his crystalline skin had taken on an almost transparent quality that showed he had not been sleeping well. "Commander?" Veltara said softly. Zexthul turned from the window. "I have been thinking about Titan Base, about whether I should tell this story. Some memories are too heavy to carry alone, but too dangerous to share. The siege of Titan Base was the turning point of the war. It was the moment we realized we were not fighting soldiers. We were fighting something else entirely." Zexthul moved to his chair, his movements slower than usual. Titan Base was humanity's last major stronghold in the outer system. 50,000 of our troops surrounded 8,000 human defenders. The base should have fallen in weeks. Veltara activated her recording equipment. But it did not. It held for 4 months. 4 months that changed everything we thought we knew about warfare. The alien's breathing made that familiar whistling sound. The human commander was Colonel Patricia Wells. Intelligence reports said she was 42 years old, career military, known for unconventional tactics. What made her tactics unconventional? She turned defense into offense. Instead of waiting for us to attack, she sent constant raids against our positions. Small groups of humans would appear from nowhere, strike our supply lines, and vanish back into the base's underground tunnel system. Zexthul's upper arms gestured as he continued. These were not random attacks. Wells was targeting our psychological weak points. She would hit medical stations, communication centers, command posts, places where losing people hurt our morale more than our fighting ability. This was effective? More effective than we expected. Our soldiers began to fear the night shifts. They knew that somewhere in the darkness human raiders were moving through tunnels we could not map, planning attacks we could not predict. The alien veteran's skin color shifted to a darker shade. But the worst part was the sounds. The humans would sing while they attacked, war songs like the ones we heard at Ross 128. But these were different, quieter, more haunting. They would sing as they moved through our lines, and the sound would echo through the tunnels. What kind of songs? Songs about home, about people they loved, about fighting for something worth dying for. Our soldiers found these songs more disturbing than battle cries would have been. It is one thing to face an enemy who hates you. It is another thing to face an enemy who loves something more than they fear death. Veltara made notes as Zexthul continued. Tell me about the specific incidents that affected you most. The siege cannon incident. Zexthul's 4 eyes closed for a moment. We had positioned a massive siege cannon to breach the base's main wall. It was our largest weapon, protected by 40 soldiers and automated defense systems. The humans could not possibly reach it. But they did? Lieutenant Danny Foster volunteered for what the humans called a suicide mission. He infiltrated our position by crawling through maintenance tunnels for 3 days. He lived in the machinery, eating scraps, drinking condensation water, studying our security patterns. The alien's voice became quieter. Foster had surgical implants, small explosive devices that he had carried inside his own body. On the 3rd night, he activated them while standing next to the cannon's power core. He killed himself to destroy the weapon. He killed himself and 43 of our engineers. But before he activated the explosives, he sent a message back to the base. Just 5 words. Tell my wife I kept my promise. Zexthul was quiet for several moments. I researched Foster after the war. He had been married for 6 months. His wife was pregnant with their first child. He died without ever seeing his son. This kind of sacrifice was common among the human defenders? It was so common that we stopped being surprised by it. What surprised us was how the other humans reacted to these sacrifices. They did not mourn, they celebrated. They would hold ceremonies to honor the dead, then immediately plan new attacks. The alien veteran's breathing became heavier. Colonel Wells herself led many of these raids. She was wounded 7 times during the siege but refused medical evacuation. She said her place was with her people, fighting beside them until the end. What was the most difficult part of the siege for your forces? The civilians. Zexthul's skin grew darker again. We expected to fight soldiers. We did not expect to fight doctors. Doctors? Dr. Helen Carter was the base's chief medical officer. As our forces breached the outer defenses, we thought we would find her treating only human wounded. Instead, we found her operating on a wounded Zephyrian prisoner, while human soldiers lay dying nearby, untreated. Veltara looked up from her notes. She was treating your soldiers? When our troops reached the medical bay, Carter looked up from the operating table where she was working on one of our wounded scouts. She was covered in blood, exhausted, but her hands were steady. She looked at our soldiers and said something that our translators had trouble with. What did she say? She said the Hippocratic Oath does not recognize species boundaries. She said if we were there to kill her, we should wait until she finished saving our soldier's life. Zexthul's 4 arms moved in what his people used to show amazement. Our soldiers did not know what to do. They had orders to secure the medical facility, but here was an enemy doctor saving the life of one of our people while her own soldiers died around her. What happened? The squad leader made a decision that probably saved his career. He posted guards around the medical bay and let Carter continue working. She operated for 6 more hours, treating wounded from both sides based on the severity of their injuries, not their species. The alien's voice became softer. When she finally finished, Carter cleaned her hands and asked our squad leader if she could say goodbye to her patients. She went to each bed, human and Zephyrian, and told them they would recover. She told our soldiers that they had fought with honor and should be proud. Then what? Then she asked to be executed quickly because she was too tired to be afraid anymore. Zexthul's skin had become almost transparent. The squad leader could not do it. He sent Carter to a prisoner-holding facility instead. She spent the rest of the war treating wounded prisoners and teaching our medical staff about human anatomy. Veltara was quiet for a moment. This changed how your soldiers viewed the humans? It confused us completely. How could the same species that produced suicide bombers also produce someone who would risk her life to save enemy wounded? How could people be so violent and so compassionate at the same time? Did you find an answer? Not until much later. During the peace negotiations, I asked Carter directly about this contradiction. She said there was no contradiction. She said, humans fight viciously to protect what they value, and what they value most is the idea that all life has meaning. Zexthul looked directly at the reporter. Carter said that Danny Foster died to protect his unborn child, and she treated wounded enemies to protect the idea that healing should never stop, even during war. Both actions came from the same source, which was love. Humans fight because they love something, not because they hate their enemies. This is what made them so dangerous. Hatred can be satisfied by victory. Love can only be satisfied by protection, and protection never ends. The alien veteran was quiet for several moments. The siege finally ended when Colonel Wells received orders to evacuate. The human high command needed her forces for a final offensive, but even the evacuation was planned like an attack. How so? Wells divided her people into 3 groups. The first group would escape through the tunnel system. The second group would create diversions to cover the escape. The third group would stay behind to make sure the base could not be used by our forces. They destroyed their own base? They destroyed everything useful and booby-trapped everything else. When we finally entered Titan Base, we found a facility that was completely useless to us. Every piece of equipment was sabotaged. Every computer was wiped. Every supply depot was empty or contaminated. Zexthul's breathing became labored. But they also left messages, painted on walls, carved into metal, written in their own blood. Messages for us to find. What kind of messages? Some were warnings about booby traps. Some were insults about our military competence. But most were just names. Lists of human soldiers who had died during the siege, with notes about their families, their dreams, their reasons for fighting. Why would they leave these messages? Colonel Wells explained. This during her final broadcast to our forces. She said the messages were to remind us that every human we had killed was a real person with a real life. She said we might have taken the base, but we could never take away the meaning of their sacrifice. The aliens' 4 eyes focused on something beyond the reporter. Wells also said something else in that broadcast, something that haunted our commanders for the rest of the war. What was that? She said Titan Base was just one base. She said there were hundreds of other bases, thousands of other colonies, millions of other humans who would fight us the same way. She said we had won a single battle, but we had not even begun to understand the scope of the war we had started. Veltara checked her recording equipment. Was she right? 10 days had passed since the last interview. When Veltara arrived at the recording studio, she found Commander Zextel sitting in complete darkness. The lights were off, and only the faint glow from the station's exterior illuminated his crystalline skin. He did not move when she entered. "Commander," Veltara said as she turned on the lights. Zexthul looked up slowly. His 4 eyes seemed older, more tired than before. "I have been preparing myself to tell you about Operation Prometheus, about what humans did when we threatened their homeworld, about the day we learned that everything we thought we knew about warfare was wrong. The final human offensive? The final human offensive was not an offensive at all. It was a statement, a declaration that some things are worth more than survival itself." Zexthel's breathing was labored as he spoke. "After Titan Base, our high command made a decision that seemed logical at the time. If humans would not surrender when defeated, perhaps they would surrender when faced with the complete destruction of Earth." Veltara activated her recording equipment. "Your forces moved toward Earth?" 3 full fleets. Over 200 ships, the largest military force our people had ever assembled. The plan was simple: surround Earth. Demand unconditional surrender. If the humans refused, destroy their homeworld as an example to their remaining colonies. What was the human response? That is what we expected to find out when we arrived in the Sol system. Instead, we found something impossible waiting for us. Zexthel's upper arms gestured as he continued. Admiral Catherine Hayes commanded what remained of the human fleet. Intelligence reports said she had maybe 60 ships left. Old vessels, converted civilian craft, experimental prototypes that had never been properly tested. We outnumbered her more than 3 to 1, but she did not retreat. She did not retreat. She did not surrender. She did not even try to negotiate. Instead, she broadcast a message to our entire fleet that still echoes in my mind. What did she say? She said that we had made a mistake. She said we thought threatening Earth would make humans more reasonable. Instead, we had removed the last restraint on human behavior. She said we were about to learn what humans become when they have nothing left to lose. The alien veteran's skin had begun to shift toward that familiar darker color. Then Admiral Hayes did something that defied every principle of military strategy. She divided her small fleet into 3 groups and sent them to attack our base facilities at Wolf 359, Proxima Centauri, and Tau Ceti simultaneously. She split her forces and sent them on suicide missions against targets that were too heavily defended to capture. Our commanders thought she had lost her mind. Then the first reports started coming in. Zexthul was quiet for several moments. Captain Pete Anderson commanded a converted cargo hauler called the New Liberty. His mission was to attack our main fleet base at Wolf 359. The base was protected by our super dreadnought Cosmic Dominion and 40 escort vessels. How could one cargo ship threaten such a force? Anderson had filled his cargo holds with mining explosives, enough to destroy a small moon. His plan was to ram the Cosmic Dominion's reactor core and detonate everything at once. The aliens' breathing became heavier. Our base commander tried to intercept the New Liberty before it could reach ramming distance. Anderson's ship was burning, breaking apart under our fire, losing crew members with every hit. Any reasonable commander would have retreated or surrendered, But Anderson continued. Anderson maintained course toward our flagship. As his ship died around him, he broadcast a message to every human vessel in the system. He said that for every world we had taken, for every life we had ended, this was humanity's answer. Zexthol's 4 eyes closed for a moment. The New Liberty struck the cosmic dominion at full velocity. The explosion destroyed both ships instantly and crippled 12 of our escort vessels. Over 3,000 Zephyrian crew members died in that single attack. This happened at all 3 targets? All 3. Captain Monica Lee at Proxima Centauri rammed her destroyer into our orbital weapons platform while her crew sang human battle songs. Commander Steve Parker at Tau Ceti flew his damaged cruiser directly into our fuel depot, creating a chain reaction that destroyed half our supply fleet. The alien veteran's voice became quieter. But the most disturbing part was what happened after these attacks. When we sent rescue teams to recover survivors, we found human rescue teams already there. Human rescue teams? Admiral Hayes had sent medical ships to all 3 battle sites. Human doctors and medics were treating wounded Zephyrian survivors with the same care they gave to their own people. They had risked their lives to save the lives of enemies who had just lost friends to human attacks. Veltara looked up from her notes. This confused your forces? It broke their minds. How could humans sacrifice themselves to kill us and then risk themselves to save us in the same battle? How could they be so merciless and so merciful at the same time? Did you understand it? Not until I met one of those medical teams. Sergeant Amy Phillips had been badly wounded when her rescue ship was damaged by debris from the Wolf 359 battle. She spent 6 hours in a damaged life pod keeping a critically injured Zephyrian navigator alive through manual medical procedures. Zexthol's skin had become almost transparent. Phillips had lost friends in the attack. Her own brother had been killed at Titan Base. She had every reason to hate us. But when I asked her why she saved an enemy combatant, her answer was simple. What did she say? She said that was what humans do. She said they fight like demons when they have to, but they do not forget what they are fighting to protect. She said the moment they start treating wounded enemies like enemies instead of wounded people, they become the kind of species they are fighting against. The alien veteran was quiet for several moments. That conversation changed how I understood the entire war. Humans were not fighting to defeat us. They were fighting to remain human while defeating us. The attacks forced your withdrawal? The simultaneous destruction of 3 major fleet assets forced our high command to reconsider their strategy. But it was not just the military losses. It was the psychological impact on our forces. Our soldiers had seen humans sacrifice everything to protect their values, then immediately demonstrate those values by saving enemy lives. Your troops began to doubt the war? Our troops began to fear that we were fighting something we could not comprehend. An enemy that could destroy us and heal us in the same moment. An enemy that got stronger instead of weaker when faced with impossible odds. Zexthel looked directly at the reporter. But Admiral Hayes was not finished teaching us lessons. After the attacks, she requested a meeting with our fleet commander under a flag of truce. What did she want to discuss? She wanted to explain what would happen next if we continued toward Earth. She brought detailed plans showing how humans intended to defend their home world. Plans that made Operation Prometheus look like a minor skirmish. Such as, every human, civilian on Earth had been organized into resistance cells. Every city had been prepared for siege warfare. Every factory had been converted to produce weapons. Even human children were being trained to fight. The aliens' breathing became labored. But the most terrifying part was what they planned to do if Earth fell. Hayes showed us intelligence reports about human colonies throughout the galaxy. Every single colony had received orders to continue fighting even if Earth was destroyed. They would not surrender even if their homeworld was gone. Hayes explained that humans do not fight for territory. They fight for ideas. She said Earth was important because it was their birth world, but the ideas that made them human existed wherever humans lived. What were these ideas? Freedom, justice, the belief that all thinking beings deserve dignity and respect. Hayes said these concepts would survive even if every human died defending them. She said other species would remember how humans had fought and died, and those species would carry human values forward. Zexthul's 4 arms moved in what his people used to show amazement. Hayes was telling us that humans had already won the war. Even if we killed every human in the galaxy, human ideas would survive and spread to other species. We would spend the rest of our existence fighting the memory of humanity. This convinced your leaders to negotiate? This convinced our leaders that the war was unwinnable. You cannot defeat an enemy whose greatest weapon is the example they set while dying. You cannot conquer people who consider their principles more important than their lives. The alien veteran looked at his hands. The peace negotiations began 3 days after Hayes's presentation. But the real lesson of Operation Prometheus was not about military strategy. It was about the nature of humanity itself. Which was, humans are not just another species that fights for survival. They are a species that has chosen to evolve beyond survival. They fight for abstract concepts that exist only in their minds, but which they consider more real than their own bodies. This made them dangerous. This made them incomprehensible to species like ours that still fight for concrete things like territory and resources. How do you negotiate with someone who would rather die than compromise their principles? How do you defeat someone whose victory condition is to remain true to their values? 2 weeks passed before the final interview session. When Veltara entered the recording studio, she found Commander Zexthul standing before a wall display showing images from the peace negotiations on Kepler Station. His 4 arms were clasped behind his back, and his crystalline skin had returned to its normal blue color, though it seemed somehow different, more reflective, as if his experiences had changed its very structure. "These are from the peace talks?" Veltara asked as she prepared her equipment. "These are the moments when I truly understood what humans are." Zexthul turned from the display. Everything that happened during the war, the battles, the sacrifices, the impossible tactics, all of that was just preparation for what I witnessed during the negotiations. The peace talks were difficult. The peace talks were education. My people sent me as a military advisor, expecting to deal with bitter, hardened warriors who would demand revenge for their losses. Instead, I met people who seemed to have forgotten that we had been enemies just months before. Zexthul moved to his chair, his movements more fluid than in previous sessions. The first human delegate I encountered was Ambassador Kevin Taylor. Intelligence reports said he had lost 2 sons during the war, one at Ross 128, another during the siege of Titan Base. I expected him to hate us, but he did not. He greeted me with what humans call a handshake. He asked about my family, my health, whether I was comfortable with the station's environment. When I finally worked up the courage to ask about his sons, his response shocked me. Veltara activated her recording equipment. What did he say? He said his sons had died protecting what they believed in, and now his job was to make sure their sacrifice meant something. He said the best way to honor their memory was to build a peace that would prevent other parents from losing their children. The alien veteran's breathing was steady as he continued. Taylor spent 6 hours that first day explaining human philosophy to me. Not negotiating, not making demands, just talking about what humans believe and why they fight for those beliefs. What did you learn? I learned that humans separate the people from the actions. Taylor could hate the war while respecting the soldiers who fought it. He could mourn his sons while still treating their killers with dignity. This concept was completely foreign to my people. Zexthul's upper arms gestured as he spoke. The next human I met was Dr. Sandra Lee. She had spent the war developing medical treatments for wounded soldiers. During our conversation, she presented a proposal for joint human-Zephyrian medical research. She wanted to work with former enemies. She wanted to work with former enemies to benefit both species. When I asked how she could work alongside those who had been trying to kill her people just months before, she smiled and said something I will never forget. Which was? She said that humans had fought us because they had to protect what they valued. Now they could protect what they valued by working together. She said the choice between fighting and cooperating was always a choice, and humans preferred cooperation when it was possible. The alien skin had taken on a brighter quality. Dr. Lee spent 3 days showing me human medical research, technologies that could help both our species. treatments for diseases that affected Zephyrians as well as humans. She had been working on these projects even during the war. Even while fighting you? Even while fighting us, humans were thinking about how to help us. This was perhaps the most disturbing revelation of all. It meant that humans could kill us and heal us with equal dedication. Veltara made notes as Zexthul continued. Tell me about the military negotiations. The military negotiations were where I met former Marine Corps General Robert Stone. He had commanded ground forces during some of the war's bloodiest engagements. He had personally ordered attacks that killed thousands of our soldiers. How did he behave during the talks? He requested a private meeting with me. When we met, he presented me with a memorial plaque honoring Zephyrian soldiers who had died in battles under his command. He had researched every engagement, identified every casualty, learned the names of as many of our dead as possible. Zexthul's 4 eyes focused on something beyond the reporter. Stone said that every life lost diminished us all. He said that our soldiers had died with honor far from home, following orders just as his soldiers had. He said they deserved to be remembered. What was your response? I could not speak for several minutes. Here was a human general who had killed thousands of my people, and he was honoring their sacrifice. He was treating enemy dead with the same respect he showed his own fallen comrades. The alien veteran was quiet for a moment. Stone also apologized, not for fighting the war, but for the necessity of the war. He said he was sorry that political failures had led to a situation where good soldiers on both sides had to die for causes they did not create. This changed your understanding of human nature? This revealed the core of human nature. Stone could be a ruthless killer in battle and a compassionate mourner in peace. He could honor his enemies while never forgetting his duty to his own people. These were not contradictions. They were different expressions of the same underlying values. Veltara looked up from her notes. What values? The belief that all thinking beings have worth. The idea that war is sometimes necessary, but never good. The understanding that enemies in war can become partners in peace if both sides choose to move beyond their grievances. Zexthul's breathing became deeper. But the most profound moment came during the final ceremony. Admiral Catherine Hayes, who had commanded the human forces during Operation Prometheus, made a presentation to our delegation. What kind of presentation? She presented a detailed analysis of every major engagement of the war, not from a military perspective, but from a philosophical one. She explained why humans had fought the way they did, what they had been trying to protect, and what they had learned about us during the conflict. What had they learned? Hayes said that humans had initially viewed us as conquerors who needed to be stopped. But as the war continued, they realized we were simply a different species with different values, following orders from leaders who had made poor decisions. The alien's skin had become almost luminous. Hayes said that humans had come to respect Zephyrian courage, honor, and military skill. She said our soldiers had fought bravely for what they believed was right, even when they were wrong about the larger situation. She was absolving your forces of guilt? She was explaining that humans distinguished between individual soldiers and the political decisions that create wars. Hayes said that most Zephyrian soldiers were honorable people caught in a dishonorable situation, just like most human soldiers. Zexthul looked directly at the reporter. Then Hayes made a proposal that changed the entire nature of the negotiations. She suggested joint military exercises. Human and Zephyrian forces training together, learning from each other, building relationships that would prevent future conflicts. Your leaders agreed to this? After much debate, they agreed. The first joint exercises were held 6 months after the peace treaty was signed. I participated as a liaison officer. Watching human and Zephyrian soldiers work together was like witnessing a miracle. How so? Soldiers who had been trying to kill each other a year earlier were now sharing tactical knowledge, teaching each other about their respective technologies, even developing friendships. The alien veteran's voice became softer. I asked one of the human officers, Captain Ben Wright, how he could work so easily with former enemies. His answer was simple. He said that once the political reasons for fighting were removed, there was no reason for soldiers not to respect and learn from each other. This became the foundation for the current peace? This became the foundation for something much more important than peace. It became the foundation for understanding. Humans taught us that enemies are not permanent conditions. They are temporary disagreements between people who have more in common than they realize. Zexthal was quiet for several moments. As our interview concludes, I want to share the most important lesson I learned about humans. It is a lesson that every species in the galaxy should understand, which is, humans are not just another warrior species. They are a species that has learned to weaponize their own humanity. Their compassion makes them fight harder for those they protect. Their sense of justice makes them willing to sacrifice everything for their principles. Their capacity for forgiveness makes them stronger in peace than they were in war. The alien's forearms moved in a gesture of deep respect. To fight humans is to face an enemy that becomes more dangerous the more pressure you apply. But to make peace with humans is to gain allies who will share their strength with you. Would you fight humans again if ordered? Zexthal paused for a long time before answering. I would follow orders as a soldier must. But I would pray to all the ancient spirits that such orders never come. For I have seen what humans become when cornered, and I have also seen what they become when offered friendship. Both are equally formidable, and both deserve our respect. Any final thoughts for our audience? Yes. To any species that might contemplate conflict with humanity, I offer this warning and this promise. They will fight you with a determination that defies logic.